Hello everyone, I'm Morgan and today I'm here to talk to you about my top 10 favorite books of 2020. So I tried to rank them, so bear with me. It was really hard to pick because I've read almost 150 books this year, but I managed it. So these are the best of the best, in my opinion. The first 5 I'm going to talk to you about are part of my top 10, but like the second 5, like the top 5, I would say are all-time favorite books. Like they became all-time favorite as soon as I read them, whereas the next ones, like, I think they're amazing, they just didn't become all-time favorites so far. I just think they're also really, really great. So enough introduction, I'm going to tell you about these books. So the first book I want to mention is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I mentioned this very recently in a recent reads video, so I'm not going to talk to you too much about it, but it's just nothing like any other book I have read. It has a little bit of a fantasy element, but ultimately I just thought this was so interesting because we follow this main character who is completely unreliable, and he doesn't realize it, that he's so unreliable. Like, he tries to remember, he really does, but something is stopping him from remembering things. He is in this world that we don't really know much about at the beginning, and we follow his journal entries trying to just live in this world. Actually, he's not even trying to find out too much about it, like a little bit because of the other, so the other human that he sees, he meets him every week, but besides that, he is just happy living in this world, being in harmony with it, I would say, and it's just so nice to read. The writing is amazing, so I went and bought Jonathan Strange and Mr. No actually as soon as I finished it because I wanted more of Susanna Clarke's writing. It's just so good, and yeah, just read it. The second book I want to mention today is The Hidden Girl and Other Stories by Ken Liu, which is a short story collection of sci-fi and fantasy stories. I read this earlier this year, so I think in March or something, and it has stayed in my mind completely. It's one of the only short story collections that I've ever liked. Like, every single one of them was really good, though I did have my favorites. Yeah, it opened a whole world for me. I want to read a lot more of short story collections, especially in sci-fi and fantasy, and I'm in awe of this. How he can just show all his ideas in just a few words, a few pages, and I wouldn't say they're all fully realized, obviously, because there are short stories, and I wouldn't mind having more of that, but still, they didn't feel unfinished, and that's what you want from a short story. So yeah, really, really good book. Then the next book I want to mention is Sal and Gabi Break the Universe. Though I also could have picked the second book in the series, I read both of these this year because of my challenge of reading the BookTube SFF nominees, BookTube SFF awards, yeah. And I am so glad I read this. It was amazing. It's a middle grade book featuring Sal and Gabi, the two main characters. I have talked about this a lot this year, but let me do this just a little bit more. And so Sal is a young boy who has just changed schools at the beginning of the book, and he meets Gabi, who is a very sweet girl, and she's kind of a know-it-all here and there, but she's still very sweet. And Sal is really into magic, so he always comes to school with magical objects and wants to try to make people laugh with them, but he also has problems. So his mother has died a few years ago, and his father is remarried, which he's totally fine with. He loves his stepmother, but he misses his mom, obviously, and there's a sci-fi element in this, in that Sal can sort of feel other worlds, and sometimes he ends up bringing his mom from other worlds, so she's not really his mom, but she's the version of this world, and he cannot stop it. And we also have his father, who works in physics, he does research, and so he knows a little bit about what's happening with Sal, and they're trying to find out what it's doing to the universe, and that's part of the plot. But what I love most about this book, besides this plot that is very interesting, is the friendship. That's always what works for me, the friendship between Sal and Gabi, but also the coziness of Sal's family and Gabi's family. Gabi has multiple dads, which makes sense if you read the book, and they're all so nice and sweet, just a whole family, and how they all love eating. They talk about food so much, and it always makes me hungry to read this book. It's such a nice read. Like, you have a smile throughout the whole book, though there are some sad things happening, but it's not what dominates the book. And yeah, nice book. Now the next book I want to talk about is Writers and Lovers by Lily King on the 7th Spot. I don't actually own this book. I listened to the audiobook, and I would recommend you do so as well, because it's a really good audiobook. This is about a woman who has recently lost her mother, and she also wants to become a writer. She has written this novel, but she has never been really happy with it. She hasn't given it to a publisher or anything. Yeah, she's very unsure of herself. She's working as a waitress in the meantime until she manages to publish her novel, and we just follow her and her love life as well, which was interesting. She doesn't really know what to do. She's between two men. One is very stable, has 2 sons, and is quite older, and the other one is kind of the same age as her and also wants to become a writer. And I personally totally understood why she would hesitate between the two of them. They both had really great things, though I was rooting for her to end up with the writer. I love books about writers, first of all, so this was totally a book for me. But just in general, like, this was very well written. The characters I really enjoyed. They just were fully formed, and I could really empathize with the main character. And I was reading for her from beginning to end, even though sometimes she made bad choices. I loved it. Then on the 6th spot I have Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman. This was one of the first graphic novels I have read, so the first one was, and this, I picked the second volume specifically as my favorite, just because this deals a bit more with Nick's sexuality, actually, and I thought this was so well done. It's just so accepting and nice. So I don't want to spoil you about this book in particular, but just Heartstopper in general, I think you probably have heard of by now because it's so popular. But if you haven't, Heartstopper follows the story of Nick and Charlie, 2 men, boys who meet in high school, and it's about their story basically. And we see them with their families, we see the text they send each other. Yeah, we just follow them in life, growing up, figuring things out, being people, and I love this so much. It's the cutest book ever, the cutest series. I've mentioned this before, but the only reason I haven't read the 3rd book already is because I'm keeping it for a day where I really need to pick me up, because I know this series can do that. And they're also really easy to read. Like, I only took an hour and a half to read each of them. It's really fast going, and what I loved so much also about this series is that Alice Oseman can really draw facial emotions, facial expressions, sorry, and also body language, and that's something I wasn't expecting. I could really understand what was going on just by looking at the drawings, and that's not what I feel with other graphic novels that I have read so far. So kudos to her for that. It just makes for an amazing experience. Like me specifically, when I look at people like in real life, I notice a lot of facial expressions and everything, so that's something that's really important to me, and here I could really see it. So great. And yeah, just the cuteness. I guess that's what I needed in 2020. I needed cute things, and that's what you can see from a lot of these books. But yeah, now getting into the top 5. So the all-time favorites. The first one is Foundation by Isaac Asimov. We follow Harry Seldon, who builds the Foundation. He's one of the psychohistorians, and psychohistorians can sort of predict the future using probabilities and mathematics, and already that concept I find fascinating. I'm a physics student, so obviously like mathematics and everything I'm really into, so this was for me. First of all, the only criticism I would say about this series, so far anyway, is that it's all about men. It's like women are only there to make food for the men while they're working, and that's kind of annoying. But personally, I was just changing the gender of some of these characters in here, so it didn't make me mad at all. Some of these characters just felt more like women in my head, so I just did it, and thus I didn't get bothered by this. But yeah, just the concept is amazing, and it was really well done. I cannot wait to continue on with this series. The only reason I haven't done it is because, you know, these books that you know you're gonna love, so you don't pick them up because you can keep them for later. That's what is happening with this series, but I'm going to read the second one at least next year, so it's happening. But yeah, this one was so interesting, and also like it's set in many different periods. Like I think you have at least 50 years between each chapter, and we follow different characters who are part of this foundation. And this foundation, so what happens at the beginning of the book is that so Harry Seldon, who built the foundation, says that the Galactic Empire is going to crumble, and he gets accused because of that, because the Galactic Empire is saying that he wants the Galactic Empire to crumble, like he is trying to do something against them, and I think he gets killed because of it or something like that. But in secret he creates a foundation to keep some information about the Galactic Empire so that it will not actually die, I guess, completely. You will still have some memories. And so we follow Harry Seldon at first, and then other characters further in the future who are part of this foundation, and all of their stories were just as interesting. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. Then at the 4th place I have A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess, which is a dystopian classic. This is also a very weird book. The first, I don't know, third of it is extremely violent. It talks about ultra violence. Specifically, it follows this guy who I think is like 20, 25, Alex. Yeah, 15-year-old, really? Wow, okay. Oh, I don't remember that. I didn't think he was that young, but he does a lot of horrible things. He rapes women, he kills people, he does everything and doesn't care. He is trying to get into many people's houses and steal things with his friends. He does all kinds of crazy things until he gets caught, and it's just really dealing with the question that, do you want people to have free will and do whatever they want, including bad things, or do you want to scrap people from having a free will and only do good things? And that was very interesting. Again, I just really liked this question of morals, and I thought it was really well done how he showed it. And yeah, it's a very short book. As I said, the first third half is really hard to read, but it becomes a lot better, I think, in the second half. So yeah, really good. And also the writing, I was kind of in love with. I am not sure how to describe it. It's not very descriptive. It's, I don't know, it's very particular of the 60s, I would say, in the UK. And I've been reading actually more books set in the 60s, and I always love the way it's written. It's not old English, it's just a little bit different than English nowadays, and it totally works for me. On the third place, I have another classic, and it is Little Women by Susanna Alcott. I finally read this year to actually see the movie, and I also love the movie, so I'm really glad. I don't have a lot to say about this one, however, besides the fact that Jo is my favorite March sister, and I'm glad I finally read this classic. It was so sweet as well, and I was expecting it to be really harder to read than it was, so I was happy to be wrong about that. I actually ran through it pretty quickly once I got into it, and all the March sisters I loved, though Jo was my favorite. Amy was also great, and I will just never forget them. I think they just really come out of the page, and they feel so real, and I love the way they interact with each other. Yeah, just nice book. Now coming to the last two, on second place I have Loveless by Oseman, which I also talked about recently, so I won't talk about it too much, but I loved this so much. I was just really into it. I mean, it was the right book at the right time, honestly. As I mentioned in my previous video, it was just exactly what I needed, because though it is a book about being asexual and being romantic, it's also a lot about friendship, and that's what always gets me, especially like in YA, I would say, and just in general. And so it worked here once again. We follow Georgia, who gets into uni at the beginning of the book, and actually no, we follow her a little bit in her senior year of high school, and then when she gets into uni, and we follow her meeting Rooney, who is her roommate at university. Rooney is kind of closed off at first, but the more time evolves, the more she opens up, and they start a really nice friendship. But Georgia also has her friends from high school who are there with her in uni, Pip and Jason, who I both loved, and she also meets Sunil and some other people in university, and just in general it was a beautiful story, and I would highly recommend you read it. And then my favorite book of 2020, and the best one I would say, is Real Life by Brendan Taylor. I have a dedicated review for this one if you want to hear a bit more about it, but this was just a masterpiece. I don't understand why it didn't win the Man Booker Prize, though then again I haven't read the winner, maybe one day I will. Either way, this was amazing. It is about Wallace, who is a black man studying in the US. He is a PhD student studying biology, and it's about the way his friends treat him, first of all. It's also about how he is battling depression, I would say. I mean, I don't think the word depression is ever used in the book, but you can see clearly that he's not okay. There are many things that are angering him, but he doesn't do anything about them because he feels kind of empty, and that's what I would say depression feels like. I mean, I have never had depression and I'm not a psychologist, but that's what I've always seen depression described as, either way. And though this tackles many depressing topics, it was still such a nice read because the writing is amazing in this. Like, it reads so easily, and I think it's a real craft to be able to talk about these topics and not make it too depressing. Like, I didn't feel bad reading it. Like, there were a few scenes that were really hard to read and made me mad, but ultimately I was just in awe of everything, and I wanted to be Wallace's friend as well. I just wanted to go in the book and give him a hug, and yeah. Some of his friends were nice, but even the ones who were nice did questionable things here and there, and that's how the question of racism comes in a little bit. And Wallace also starts a relationship with one of his friends who doesn't admit to be gay to anyone, has never said so, so he doesn't know how to act with him. The guy tries to connect with him, but obviously he feels so empty. He's like, is there a point to me even trying anything with him? Is there a point to anything in life? And I don't know, I think it's kind of relatable as well in that, and also about how Wallace is tackling his academic career. A lot of people have been mean to him in his team, I would say, in university, doing his research, but he doesn't say to anyone because he knows he's black and everything. He's not even sure that anyone would believe him. He just tries to do the work and hope it will be enough, but also he doesn't feel like he has the strength to fight for himself. And I could just talk about this book, you know, for ages, but I wouldn't do it justice. It's a masterpiece, and yeah, just the best book of 2020 and of the last 5 years or something. So yeah. That was the last book I wanted to talk to you about, my favorite book of 2020. Please tell me if you have read any of these books or what your favorite books of 2020 are, as I would love to know. And that's all for me for today. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon in another video. Goodbye!